Hello, everybody. Thanks very much to Not Equal for working with us on this project. And very interesting to be, part of this community, to hear all sorts of different perspectives about serving this the Not Equal agenda. So I'll say a few things about this project that was funded by Not Equal, called the COVID-19 Debt Advice Project. I'll say some things about who the team is, and then say just a few things about the project. We haven't yet gotten underway, so I can't report anything that we've done or give you some lovely screenshots, but we hope to do this very soon. So I'm Adam Wyner. I'm the PI on the project. I have a background in artificial intelligence and law, so applying computer science techniques to legal information, case law, legislation, these kinds of things, as well as policymaking. So it's really the direction of applying computer science to legal information. The other person is Richard Owen, Professor Richard Owen, who's the co-investigator. He's a law professor at Swansea University, because I have a joint position between computer science and law. And he is the director of the legal advice clinic at Swansea University in the law school. So he's bringing all of his advice, legal advice, to the project. So this is really a collaboration between law and computer science, which I can just make the remark that it's never been an easy alliance. If you can imagine two fields that are more far apart, please tell me, because I'll feel better. But they're very far apart in terms of how they understand things, which is also extremely interesting in terms of getting work done and discovering things. We have some external partners, Patrick O'Brien, who's a specialist in insolvency, but he also does pro bono work, giving advice to people who come to ask him for debt advice, and he does that for free. Warren Palmer, who works at a legal advice center called Speakeasy Law in Cardiff. And also Rebecca Williams has been added. She's the debt advisor at Citizens Advice, who I'm sure that everybody knows, because Citizens Advice provides lots of fantastic services across the country, and she's a specialist in debt advice. And it's really essential to have these partners on the project, because they bring their knowledge and experience and materials and contacts about debt and about debt advice to the community that needs this advice, which is, people who, just citizens who are not yet able to contact and to pay for a lawyer. And we're not talking about giving business advice, right? So this is pro bono legal advice. The fact of the matter is that I believe the government ended their funding for pro bono legal services some time ago. And there are very, very significant problems in providing legal services pro bono to people who need the advice. We also, in fantastic discussion with Clara, it was very interesting. The suggestion was to add an advisory panel to the project, covering kinds of different aspects, because the point was we wanted to see that there was some critical thinking and also a sociological point of view about the work that we were doing, especially when it comes to the law. You don't want to just reproduce the power structures of law and the practices of law into an AI tool. You want to be critiquing this as well. So to that end, a colleague of mine, Nena, she's a senior lecturer at Swansea University in law, but her specialty is digital rights. And she's spent quite a lot of time focusing on who has rights and who has access, and critiquing these kinds of digital tools. So I hope that, to gain a lot from her perspective, that'll be a very important addition. And also Lee Clark, who works in computer science at this human-computer interaction phase. The point being here that, as I'll mention later, we have a tool that interacts with people in language. And if you've ever done a survey, you know that how you phrase something is essential to getting the message across, okay? And casting messages in the right way for the right kinds of audiences, and to bring that kind of sensitivity to the project. So I look forward also to hearing more from him about his view on what we're doing. So what we're doing. I hate to be lucky in this way, but today, The Guardian has this headline: debt crisis warning as UK reports steep rise in emergency borrowing. This is specifically linked to borrowing and debt because of the pandemic, but this is not a new phenomena. In fact, if you go back 5, 10 years, there was a dramatic increase in debt, and people were having very great difficulty in getting advice about how to manage their debt. Let's think just for a moment, what does that mean, to people in the community, right? We're talking about debt that bears on their rent, their council payments, paying for food, paying for utility costs, paying for gasoline for their car, borrowing far more than they can afford to pay back at exorbitant interest rates, getting into legal trouble with the council for falling behind on their payments, etc. Social problems, personal problems, across the board, enormous stress. So the pandemic has only made this much, much worse than an existing problem. And the problem for people is that it's very difficult to know, where do you get advice? If you need to navigate through the council because of unpaid bills, and you've got somebody knocking on your door to demand payment, how do you protect yourself? And unless you can get some timely legal advice, the problems are simply going to mount. That's the current circumstance of unmet legal need. So the problem, the pandemic has simply added to this, right? And this has created a new degree of unfairness, inequality, and dampening of economic opportunities across the board. The legal advice centers and qualified lawyers who can offer pro bono services have insufficient capacity. There are simply not enough people to advise members of the community about their debt. And the government does not provide legal services in that degree, right? They can have a web page where there's information about it, but what you need to do is to provide some interpretation, some guidance, some advice, okay? So there's a very big gap between the need and the provision. So the aim is to provide some support to add capacity, because there's at least an initial phase of the pro bono legal provision, which is the triage stage, to find out what the problem is that people are facing, to gather lots of detailed information, to try to relay basic information to them about their situation, and then to provide them kind of an outline document that will help them understand their particular position, that then they can use to go to a legal professional if they need some further advice. So there's a big funnel here, right, of a lot of people needing initial legal advice to find out where they should go further. And this is something that should be developed. So what we would like to do, the aim here, is to develop, evaluate, and deploy an online COVID-19 debt advice tool. So something that's available to anybody who's got an internet connection. So this is going to be an interactive, online, customizable consultation tool. That means that you go online and you have a series of questions that you have to answer, and buttons that you may have to press, and numbers that you may put in. And behind the scenes, there can be some various kinds of decision tree or calculator, something like that, so that you're only asked the questions that are relevant to your particular set of circumstances. At the end of this process of gathering detailed information and doing some reasoning, it gives you back this document, and they can go on further with this. It's going to use an open source framework called DocAssemble. Some of you may have heard about this, which is it's a programming tool for making these kinds of consultations available on the web. If you looked up DocAssemble, you'll go to their website, and they have a lot of projects. It tends to be highly legal aid oriented. There's lots of projects based in the United States around this. As far as I know, very little in the United Kingdom. There's a similar tool called Community Lawyer. Should anybody be interested in this, you can look at that. And there are also commercial offerings that do somewhat similar kinds of things for enterprises and contracts and things like that. So what we want to do is to, basically from the computer science point of view, the lawyers and the legal advisors are the experts in the domain, and we have to understand what they do and how they do it and what their results should be sufficiently so that we can start to code this into a DocAssemble tool. We also want to see that we're incorporating current law about the COVID crisis. We want to identify those areas about the law which are not amenable to implementation in a program, because we know that we can't do everything, right? We have to do the portions that we can. And we also want to evaluate it with the practitioners and the users. And also along in the process of development, we want to have constant ongoing consultation with users in the community to help. They should be co-creating what this tool is about so that it suits their purposes and their needs. So the future work that we might see is to really extend tools like this to other areas of legal aid, to link consultations, to sort of have an underlying, let's say, knowledge graph, so that we can be reusing information across the consultations, maybe do some other things with machine learning and some semantic infrastructure, that kind of thing. But that's the overview, and thank you very much.